Hi, everyone, and thanks for sticking around this far of the conference. I'm Balázs Gerlei, and I will talk about overcoming insecurities in WebViews. Now, I'm fully aware that there's no such word as insecurities, but I'm going to talk about is the insecurities you may feel with the unsecure WebViews if you had the very good opportunity to work with them. And actually, I wanted to ask this, so please show your hands who had the opportunity to work with WebViews or the experience. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, basically WebViews tends to find their way into applications, even though if you don't want to work with them, just like a terms and conditions, or a privacy policy page, or a help page. Show of hands who had to show help and privacy policy or something like that with a WebView. Yeah, that's what I thought. So, yeah. Okay, so I'm Balázs Gerlei. Even though I've developed for Android for over a decade, security, and more specifically application security, is a relatively new interest of mine. Basically, around 3 years ago, when I joined one of the biggest password managers, that's when I started to delve into it. And now I work for a startup called Nevis Security. And we are basically a CIAM, so Customer Identity and Access Management company. We have a product both from end to end, so basically full solution from the server side down to the mobile side. I work on Android and iOS and a little bit of cross-platform solutions. We are based in mainly in Switzerland, but also in Germany, UK here, and Hungary, where I am based at. Basically, a fun fact, we are protecting over 80% of the e-banking transactions in Switzerland. Okay, but now about WebView. So I will start with a little bit of history. Then I'll show you how you can implement or basically use WebViews. Then I will go through different security issues or misconfigurations or misuses of the WebView API. I will talk a little bit about how they can be exploited, but the focus will be about protection, so how you can actually make WebView usage more secure. And I brought a bunch of demos, so let's pray for the demo gods so everything will work. Okay, so as you I think know, WebViews is the default way to display content in Android applications. It's built on top of the open source Chromium project, just as Chrome itself. And originally it was part of Android, which was not really a good idea, because if you had to ship an actual fix for any kind of security issues or a new feature even, you had to ship a new Android version. So since Android 5, it's separated, it's updatable and distributed through Google Play Store. For some interesting reason, which I don't know, on Android 7, 8, and 9, they built it into Chrome. But again, from Android 10, it's separate, fully separate. Again, users can update it. This is both a blessing and a curse, because you don't know what WebView version runs on a user's device. You cannot be sure. Maybe you can be sure what will be the minimum one based on the Android version they have. But I will actually show you this. So I have an Android 9 device connected here, and you can actually check in the settings as a user what kind of WebView versions are used. In the developer options, there is a WebView implementation. As I said, here it's Chrome. But if you disable the Chrome application, then it reverts back to being WebView. That's also a fun fact. You can disable the Chrome application. It doesn't update itself, but it will be. Yeah, it doesn't update itself for some reason. But also you can notice that this is a selectable list, but it's disabled. And actually, no real device, so no non-rooted device, this is selectable. It's only selectable on rooted devices, which I might be able to show you, although I think my device is disconnected again, which is not good. So I will just go along, I think, unless it reconnects. Yeah, it doesn't reconnect, but it doesn't really matter. What I would have shown is that there is a way on a rooted device to select a WebView implementation, and there are third-party implementations. Now, connected to something later, some users might try to use this in a rooted device if they don't want to share, for example, some statistics with Google, though I would not recommend that, because then you are relying on some third party for the WebView implementation. That's running on every single application, so I definitely wouldn't do that. But before that, some relevant classes, just so we know what we are talking about. There's a WebView, of course. That's the view that can be put in the view hierarchy. That has load URL and load data methods. And then there's these web settings where you can configure how the WebView would work. You can enable JavaScript if you like to live dangerously, set text room and things like that. And there's this WebView client, which you actually have to set if you want to load URLs inside the WebView and navigate, because unless it will throw you out into external browser. It has some methods like should override URL loading, where you can basically stop the loading of the URLs. It will come into play later, and other methods. And some of the methods are put in the Web Chrome client. Well, which goes where? I don't know either. Basically, most likely it's a legacy thing. So most newer things are going into the Web Chrome client, which you can also set on the WebView. But how to create the WebView? Well, if you are still in the view world, of course, you can declare it in the layout resource. And then you can access it by data mining, view binding. Or if you are old school like me, you can just use find view by ID. No, I'm not using it. But you can use find view by ID, and then you can set the WebView client, just as I said, and load URL, for example, to load some page. Also, you can initiate or instantiate a WebView in the code as well, and then you can put it in the layout if you want, or you can even just use it in a kind of headless manner when you are just running some code in it, and you are not actually showing it to the user. What about Compose? Well, there used to be a project, part of Accompanist, but it's abandoned. And if you check the warning, it's deprecated and it's no longer maintained. They recommend forking it for yourself, so good luck with that. But luckily, you can just wrap it in an Android View composable, and then you can put it in your composables. So that's not that hard, and you can, in the factory method, just instantiate it, set the WebView client, and then load URL in the update part. Okay. Now, with the first thing to note, it's not really a security issue, but a good thing to know. I don't know if you remember, if you set up an Android device, it asks you whether you would like to send or share usage statistics with Google anonymously, obviously. But what I'm not sure you know, that this means that WebViews themselves are reporting some stuff as well, so some analytics. But fortunately, you as a developer can opt out of this. So you can say in the manifest of your application with this metadata that you don't want the metrics. And then in your application, the WebView won't share these metrics. That's the thing to note. Remote debugging. Usually, luckily, nowadays, it's not really used, I mean, at least not really found in real application, but it used to be that it was enabled, left enabled in apps in the Play Store. So just make sure to never enable it. And also keep in mind that this is relevant to all of your WebViews. So if you enable it per process, all of the WebViews in that process will have remote debugging enabled. And what it would mean is basically that you can connect with the Chrome developer tools to the WebView. There's some docs as well. With this URI, Chrome inspect devices, and then you can actually modify the DOM or even run JavaScript in the WebView of an application. So definitely don't do this, or don't left it in, because in a debugging session, of course, it's okay. Now, let's talk about the first bigger thing, Breakout. Well, I'm not talking about the retro game, but I would promise, or at least I think that this is fun, as much fun as that game. And this is actually a game you can play. I will talk about this. But what Breakout really means is that if you don't restrict what kind of URIs or URLs can be loaded into WebView or opened in the WebView, then the naive way, or the, I don't know, easy way, is that users using the device can find a way to escape that WebView or the intended page that is shown on it. And I will have to actually show you that. Obviously not on this device, but luckily there's two. So if I reset the demo, so it's in a semi-realistic example. Let's say an application decided to use Google Maps and as a web page to display a map in an application. And you may laugh, but I've seen this happen. So, and then the user can just click around, and this is the game I was talking about, try to find a way to google.com, so a search engine. That doesn't have to be Google, of course, but this is an Android conference, so usually it's the privacy policy, Google Tag Manager, or things like that. And from the privacy policy, I found a very easy way because there's a Google logo. And if you tap it, then it takes you to the Google search page. Any minute now. Like this. And then you can load arbitrary pages inside the application. Like I would load Earth. But what else would you load in a web view? And then you can just submit a ticket for a banking application that it shows, I don't know, landscapes in there. Anyway, you can actually tackle this, but it's not easy. It's very complicated, actually. So I enable these secure settings, and this what it does in this demo is that it doesn't allow certain pages, search engines and AI chatbots and things that can take you out to be loaded, and then I cannot load with the same way the Google search page. But you may know that there's a problem with that, because then it's basically a block list, so it's or a disallow list, not an allow list, which is not good because, well, people are creative. So maybe you can stop loading Googles, and you can see it doesn't matter how I tap it, it doesn't load it. But let's see another example, a more problematic example, a dynamic JavaScript-based breakout. So here I have a button, very simple. This is just loads the page. If you tap it, and again, it's a naive example, but of course the JavaScript can do it automatically somewhere as well. It just loads example.com, but if I reset the demo and enable the secure settings, which in this case means that it only allows the URL that is originally loaded to be displayed. So it doesn't matter how I tap it, it doesn't want to load something else. Now the game I mentioned is basically you can just go around in the Play Store and try to load arbitrary pages in certain applications. I think it's pretty fun, and it's not really an exploit in and of itself. So as I already mentioned a little bit, it's kind of naive. It's not a problem in and of itself. And who would, like, what's the exploitation? Well, someone would take your unlocked phone out of your head, although now that we are in London, that's not really unimaginable. Anyways, that's not the real attack vector. Let's imagine just one example, but there's many. Just one example. You load like a support forum inside your application. And in that support forum, there's just user-generated content. And maybe the web developers forget to escape correctly JavaScript. And then JavaScript can run in the support forum. The victim user can open the support forum, and something nasty would happen on their phone. It can, especially if it's combined with social engineering, like showing a new login page, you can steal credentials, or at least the exploiter can steal credentials, and especially if it's man in the middle is possible, protocol downgrade and things like that. So even though it's a simple case, again, it's not an exploit itself even, but make sure and try to only load what you really want to load. Okay, and especially dangerous if JavaScript execution is enabled, because it's not enabled by default. But a lot of talks about in this areas just talk about don't enable JavaScript loading. But that's not really an answer, and I really don't want to give you this suggestion, because also with the realities of modern web, which I'm not very fond of, but that's what it is. Even a simple privacy page contains JavaScript. I think we know that. Now, clear text traffic, that's something, hopefully, that's not really happening nowadays. But I don't know if you know that even that we have network security config, which in XML, you can very clearly define that you don't want to enable clear text traffic. And from Android 9, it's even disabled by default. And also, you can specify which URI you want to enable clear text traffic if you are so unfortunate. But I don't know if you know that WebViews are not respecting it until Android 8. So even if you define on Android 7 that you really, really don't want to load clear text traffic, WebViews will happily load this. And actually, to not do this, you have to manually prevent it. Well, this is just a quick example I would like to mention, so maybe you should do some more realistic filtering, because this is an input, especially if it's coming from the user, This is an input, so you should sanitize the input. This is a very simple example to just not enable HTTP or clear text traffic. And also note that this is the should override URL loading, which is only called if navigation happens. So if you don't want to do this either in the initial load, especially if the initial load with the load URL using some user input, you have to escape it there as well, or that is not allow clear text traffic on Android 7 or below. Okay, There's also this HTTP strict transport security. I don't know if you heard about it. Well, let's show hands. Who heard about HSTS? Okay, now it's really only relevant if you have to use or load HTTP clear text traffic. This is basically, without going into it and also considering I'm not a web developer, that HSTS is basically, this allows protocol downgrading, so going down to HTTP from HTTPS. There's actually two ways to do it in a very broad sense. There's a way that the server can answer, and you can already know that I'm not a web developer, so the server can answer that you shouldn't, after the initial load, that you should never load this page with HTTP. Or you can get into an HSTS preload list. Actually, there's a site to check it, is hstspreload.org, where you can just check on site whether HSTS preload is enabled, and that should mean that the client should already know that this is not openable with ht.org. Sorry. So GitHub.com, for example, has this. So they are in the HSTS preload list, and you can get to the HSTS preload list. Basically, like devices can report back as well from when it's opening the server. But again, I'm not a web developer. This is only interesting or important if you have clear text traffic. If you don't allow clear text traffic, you don't really have to do this. But there is a way to enable this, and it's not enabled or not enforced by default in WebViews, never, none of the Android versions, but you can in the network security config enforce this with a flag. Okay, going forward a little bit, this is more common, I would say, if you want to display local web content, so something cached or downloaded or shipped with your APK. It is maybe not obvious that you should also set the base URL of that content, because otherwise the same origin checks would fail. And the default or the old method, load data, doesn't allow this, so you shouldn't use that because there's actually a new one. And the first instinct might be to disable same origin checks, but that's not really a good way. Of course, then it would be loaded, but it's better to use the newer load data with base URL method, which also have some additional niceties, like it can accept UTF-8 encoded HTML. You don't need to deal with present encoding or base 64, that the old method only allows that. So never use load data, always use load data with base URL. And just quickly showing you, although it's not really that exciting, I have this simple web page that, let me show the page or the HTML as well. Here. Now, it pains me to write JavaScript at every step, so don't judge my JavaScript, please. It basically just fetches example.com, and in the code, it doesn't set the base URL here. So it just uses the load data in the simple example. And in the other example, it uses the load data with base URL by setting the correct URL, so then the fetch would succeed like this. So always do this. A quick word that it's not always obvious what you should check, what you should set that base URL to. If it's your own content, it should be your own domain. If it's a cached website, it should be where it's coming from, but it's not always obvious. Okay. Going forward a little bit, Google has also this nice service called Safe Browsing. It basically checks the loaded page against a maintained list, Google maintained list of unsafe websites. It's enabled by default since Android 8. You get this nice red warning, and WebViews 66, which is, I think, the version that was shipped with Android 8. And now call back to what I said previously, that you don't really know what WebView is running on the user's device. Only maybe the minimum one that should be running, but you can explicitly enable it luckily, so I think it doesn't hurt to do this. It's again a manifest entry, a metadata to your manifest, and then it will work. Now, file access. Now I actually want to ask you, so do you think file access is enabled by default? Show the hands if you think it's enabled by default. Okay, do you think it's disabled by default then? Okay, the third option is it depends. That's the winning one. So it's allowed by default up to 110. So before that, WebViews can access arbitrary files from your device, ones that are shipped with the APK and also the ones that are on the device. Okay, now you can stop me that, Balázs, well, read external storage is needed, the permission. But I would argue then that many applications use this permission. Then you can say that, well, there's scope storage since Android 11. where there is an opt-out possible in Android 11, but from Android 12, there is a scope storage, and you can say that the safe storage access framework solves this, but not really. Let's stop a little bit, because, again, this is not about storage access, but just so you know, after knowing that you can just disable it, but that's the solution, spoiler. But what I really wanted to show is that this is a nice graph. You can see down there where it's coming from. I didn't make this, but this basically tells you what permissions do you need. And you shouldn't assume that you need the storage access framework and things like that, because if you check it in the media files that are contributed by your own applications, you don't need a permission at all. Now, the media files that are other applications contributing, you only need the storage permission. Non-media files that are contributed by your own app also don't need a permission, and only the other apps, for example, the non-media files that are contributed by other applications, that's where the storage access frameworks come into play. So make sure to, let's go back a little bit, make sure to just disable the file access, that's, unless, of course, you want to provide this functionality. Now, very similar question, though. Content provider access. Do you think it's enabled by default? Do you think it's disabled by default? OK. Do you think it depends? No, it doesn't depend. Even on Android 15, it's enabled by default. So all WebViews can access content providers. And also, you can set the permissions correctly for your application. But your application, of course, have the permission to access those content providers, and so does JavaScript running in a WebView. Let me show you a little bit that as well. So first, file access. Of course, without the secure settings, it just loads a nice Android logo. And this, if you check here the URI, this is a asset URI. So this is something shipped with the application, but you can also do something that's on the device. Here. And if I disallow file access, then it won't load. And the same goes with the content provider. But here you actually get a warning. OK. Again, this is to disable it, very easy. You should do it unless you had to provide this functionality, in which case you basically need to sanitize the load, the URIs. That's the answer, basically, to all of these things, if you actually have to do this for some reason. Now, cookies, we are in London, so we have to talk about cookies. Everyone loves them, but maybe not this kind. Not clearing them, that's the most common problem, because I don't know if you know, but the cookie jar is shared between the WebViews running in the same process. So if the user is logged in some of the WebView, then they are logged in other WebViews as well. You can manually put the WebView or the activity that's hosting the WebView on a different process, but believe me, I tried, and that's not fun. So not clearing them is a problem, especially if you consider nice things like Ever cookies. I don't know if you heard about it. It's a very nice thing. It's made by a Samikankar, good or a very famous security researchers. It basically puts the cookies everywhere. So there's almost no way to clear it, like HTML5 local storage and Silverlight when there was something. So actually, I think the only way to get rid of these cookies are the Safari's private mode. OK, but just back to the rescue in some fashion. At least there is an Android X version of WebKit that contains the WebView classes, and it backports the newer APIs to the older versions. It has niceties like, or versions of the things like WebView compat and web settings compat, etc., and nice features like dark mode, overriding user agent. I don't know why we would need that, but is actually what I want to highlight is multi-profile. This is something that you can actually have different profiles, similarly to how the Chrome web browser works, and then you don't share the cookies and local data between these. You can read up on them. I will share the slides at the end. There will be a link, so you don't need to check or save these. Now, this is the section that I don't want to go too deep, because it's really a talk in and of itself, and maybe I should make that talk, but we need to talk about running JavaScript a little bit. Now, JavaScript rendering only runs on a separate process since Android 8. Before that, it runs on the same process as the rest of your application. So if there's other exploits, vulnerabilities there, it's not impossible that JavaScript would access the memory space of your application. Again, you can put manually some things or the activity that contains the WebView on a different process, but again, that's not fun. By default, also, load URL can run JavaScript code. Even though there's a dedicated method, if you supply JavaScript into the load URL call, it will be run, only if it's the unsecure way. So you can just show a dialog. What else would you do? But if you actually disallow this, I think there's really no reason to allow this. If I remember correctly, the method to evaluate JavaScript is there since Android 4.4, but don't quote me on that, look it up. But it's really long time ago you have this evaluate JavaScript method. You should definitely use that if you want to actually run JavaScript. And if you accept user input into the URL field, it can be dangerous if it allows running JavaScript code. And the evaluate JavaScript is really better in every fashion. It's really also compares the JavaScript object between navigations, and you get a callback with the result. So it's much better in every way. So never use load URL with the JavaScript. Always evaluate JavaScript. And now here, by the way, how to disable it? There's no property setting or something like that. You have to sanitize the input. Don't allow the JavaScript URIs. Okay, I talked about sanitization a bunch, but again, keep in mind to avoid any kind of code injection, you should always sanitize the JavaScript input. Even if you run in the evaluate JavaScript, you should make sure that the user input is sanitized and only put it as a plain text. You can use simple tools like string cascade utils from Apache Common Text, but that's not protecting against everything, I have to say. So there are some more robust solutions like the OWASP Enterprise Security API, SAPI, or I actually saw quite robust custom implementations in Kotlin. That's not unimaginable to do, although it's maybe better to rely on already made stuff. Now, if you actually want to interact with the native code from the JavaScript, and I think you will begin to see why this can be an own talk, there's a lot of things to consider, but the general suggestion is really to restrict as much as you can what can be done. Try to not allow code from outside to interact with native code, only the ones that you ship with your application. Always use the JavaScript interface annotation to annotate the methods that can be called, because otherwise with reflection, is possible to call other methods from JavaScript. So the name of the game is really limiting the attack surface. So try to restrict what is possible. You have to protect against cross-site scripting attack, and I really have the feeling sometimes that web developers already went through this, and now we're just going through the same things again. So restrict the JavaScript bridge usage. Okay. Again, Jetpack, not Compose, but Jetpack to the rescue again a little bit, though this has some pretty big caveats. So there's this JavaScript engine, a Jetpack library, but it's only available on Android 8 and above, and it's still in beta. Actually, from 2023, that was the last release of it. I don't have an idea. I wanted to catch some of the Google guys to ask this, but I couldn't. Why this is not progressing? Because it's really nice. It actually provides a way to evaluate JavaScript without creating a WebView instance at all. It uses WebView in the background, but only the WebView application running on the phone. This also means, though, that the WebView application has to provide this functionality. It has to be updated to a recent version enough, although it's there for a while. The functionality in the WebView APK itself, but the library is not final for some reason. And it also has niceties like it can be done in a service, in a work manager task, so you don't need a WebView, and it provides multiple isolated environments where JavaScript code can be run. And also a big caveat, it cannot make network requests, which is a blessing and a curse in altogether, because if you have to call network resources, that's a no-go. On the other hand, there's no way to call out to the web. You can read up on it. Just show a little bit, but again, the links will be there. But do check it out. And also another good solution is custom tabs. I don't know if you use it. Who uses custom tabs? Great, it's much better, because then basically an instance of a browser runs inside your task, but it doesn't access any of your memory space and things like that. Most modern browsers support it, though originally it was a Chrome feature. Basically, you just have to create an intent and call that. And you can even customize it, the look and feel to look like it's still in your application. And from the user's perspective, it can look like it's still your application, but the browser has to carry the heavy weight and deal with the security considerations. Though keep in mind that social engineering is still possible here because the user most probably still thinks that this runs in your application. So if somehow figure out to show a login form, likely they would enter the credentials. But otherwise, other problems are not relevant if you use that. And also, I just remember a fun example, going back to the breakout. There's a non-trivial thing, like I have to give a shout out to the Darknet Diaries podcast, my favorite podcast, where there was a use case or a story that a crypto scam was working partially by showing the crypto scam website inside a real crypto application, providing legitimacy. So there are some even things like this to consider. Oh, that's why you don't want to allow breakout. Now to the takeaways, the most important takeaways. So we talked about a lot, but maybe the biggest things to remember is that try to not use WebView. So that's an interesting takeaway from a WebView talk. If you can use JavaScript engine, custom tabs to open links, or open them in an external browser. You might have to fight with the PMs of your organization, but it's better to use these. Or if you have to use WebView, properly configure the WebView. Only enable the features that you really want to enable. Make sure that you are not relying on the defaults because they are, unfortunately, especially in old Android version, as we see, they are not safe. Use the right APIs, try to use the newer ones, load data with base URL, evaluate JavaScript, JavaScript interface annotation, things like that. Make sure that you are up to date with these. And also try to restrict what URIs to load. That's really a good way to get rid of a lot of things. So override should override URL loading method and do good sanitization there. Probably try to use, or preferably try to use allow lists, so only allow what you want to allow, not restrict what you don't want to allow. And don't allow clear text, or at least enforce HSTS. Now, I also have a library that is called Secure WebView. It's still in heavy development. And actually, the code I showed you is that. So the demo I showed you was this. And I really want this not as a promo, but as a benefit of the community. So it has CC0 license, basically no license. So you can just copy some code from it as whatever you want. And run with it. But it basically has the default, so this toggle switch that. It properly configures the defaults. It doesn't allow search engines and chatbots and things like that. It provides a way to only allow the ones that you want. Yep. And with that, I would like to thank for your attention, especially for sticking around so this far. There are some more links here. Two that I want to highlight is the Android security evolution, which I maintain. This is basically a list of security features that are only available since a certain Android version. It can be a good way to argue what the minimum SDK should be raised for, because there are some things that you cannot do in an Android version. And also, I would like to highlight the Hack Tricks ebook, free ebook. It's maintained by like 100 pen testers, so it's really good way to learn about not just Android, not just WebView, but even that as well, and other things. I think Carlos Polop is the main maintainer, so shout out to him. It's a really good resource, so do check it out. That was really it. Here's the link for the speaker deck where the presentation will be uploaded, so you can check it out. I don't know, do we have time for questions? Okay, I guess so then. Any questions? Okay, I think I understand that this far to the day, you would really just want to head home. So thank you for your attention. And if you still have, if you happen to have questions, find me here or hit me up on the socials. Thank you.